Planning a trip to Europe with kids? It can feel so exciting and a little bit overwhelming. With so many countries, climates, and cultural differences, it's hard to know where to even start. And here's the first thing to know, Europe is huge. Like, it could be snowing in Norway and sunny, warm beach weather in Greece on the same day. So planning your trip really depends on the season, your kids' needs, and what you're looking to get out of this experience. I just want to add a quick disclaimer here. When I say Europe, that includes everything from the super modern cities in Scandinavia to the little villages in Albania. Some countries are really well equipped for families, while others are more laid back and less catered towards children. I'll try to cover the full range, but just know that every tip might not apply equally to every country. We're just about to set off on a 6-month overseas trip, and we'll be spending the majority of that time in Europe, traveling from the Baltics to the Balkans. After visiting the continent multiple times and exploring 21 countries, including 6 of them with our children, we have learnt so much, and we just love helping other families to plan better, smoother, and more enjoyable trips. So let's get into it. The first big decision is where to go, and there's no one-size-fits-all answer, because it really depends on your family. Start by thinking of the age of your kids. If you've got babies or toddlers, you'll likely want slower travel, shorter distances between stops, and access to essentials like nappies, high chairs, and probably a quiet place to rest. If your kids are older, they might enjoy more adventurous activities or experiences like castles, hikes, or even train rides through the countryside. Next, consider the climate for the time of year you're traveling. Europe's weather varies massively depending on where you are. In the north, like Norway or the Baltics, it can be snowing still in spring, while the south, like Spain, Greece, and Italy, could be really sunny and warm. That impacts not only what you're going to pack for the trip, but also what you're going to feel comfortable doing with your kids. Your travel pace is another thing to think about. Are you happy to move every few days, or would you rather slow down and maybe move every week or two? With young kids especially, slower travel can make a huge difference. If you can base yourself in one region, you could do day trips from this place, and that will cut down a lot on your travel and packing, and that's often the hardest part of it all. Personally, we found that a weekly moving routine works really well for us. It just means we get to have more days in the one location. So some days we'll spend out exploring and adventuring and having a lot of fun, and it also gives us some days where we can relax, maybe chill out a bit more and not feel rushed to go and see and do a lot of things. Transport and accessibility also matter. Countries like Switzerland, Germany, and the Netherlands all have really great public transport, and they're even easy to use with prams as well. In other places like the Balkans or rural parts of Spain or Italy, you might find it easier and sometimes even essential to hire a car. Tom and I used to rely mostly on trains or budget airlines. This is when we were backpacking before kids, but now we have so much luggage that I just find it so much easier to do road trips with the kids, so we just hire a car. Language can also be something to consider. In most of Western Europe and Scandinavia, English is widely spoken, and you'll even usually find English menus and signs everywhere. In more rural or off the beaten path places like Southern or Eastern Europe, English may not be as common, so knowing a few key phrases or even having your Google Translate app downloaded can really help out. And while I'm talking about it, Google Translate app is a really good one to have because you can select the languages that you want while you're in Wi-Fi, and you can download them, so you can use these offline wherever you're going, which means you're not going to get stuck needing to find a toilet for your toddler because you've got your app and you can ask the locals where to find one. Budget is another key factor. Places like Switzerland, France, and Norway are all absolutely stunning, but they can be expensive, especially for things like accommodation and eating out. When we were in Switzerland recently, we bought 2 pizzas, nothing flash, and it cost us $100 Australian. So just expect that you could be paying a lot more for a simple thing in these locations. If you're traveling longer term or watching your spending, more affordable countries like Portugal, Slovenia, or Albania can offer incredible experiences without breaking your budget. And finally, not all European countries are equal when it comes to family-friendly infrastructure. In places like Scandinavia, Austria, or Germany, you'll find a lot of high chairs and a lot of the changing tables that you'll need. You could also find family bathrooms and stroller-friendly pathways almost everywhere. In other places, like maybe a rustic village in the Balkans, these things might not be so easy to find, but that doesn't mean they're not great to visit. It just means that a bit more planning and flexibility go a long way. Let's talk about travel documents and visas, because there's a few things families need to know before booking anything. First, you need to check that your passport is valid. Most European countries require your passport to be valid for at least 3 months after the date you plan to fly out, not just from the date you arrive. If your passport is expiring soon, get it sorted early because processing times can be really long, especially for children's passports. Now let's talk about the Schengen area. And this one might get a little bit confusing. The Schengen area is a group of 29 countries that have open borders between them, which means you don't have to go through passport controls as you're crossing the border. But there is a catch. Visitors from many countries, including Australia, can only stay for up to 90 days in a 180-day period. That means if you spend 90 days in places like France, Germany, Italy, you'll need to leave the Schengen area for at least 90 days before coming back. But not all of Europe is part of the Schengen zone. Countries like the UK, Ireland, Albania, Montenegro, and much of the Balkans are outside of the Schengen zone, which can actually work in your favour if you're planning to stay for a longer time. You can mix and match places that are in and out of the Schengen zone to extend your stay in Europe altogether. And I don't want to confuse you more, but there are some exceptions to this rule, and that is by using bilateral agreements. Some of the Schengen countries may hold a bilateral agreement with your country, which can allow you to stay from 30 to 90 days extra on top of your already used Schengen time. But you can only take advantage of this bilateral agreement after you've used up your 90 days in Schengen. And you also might be required to leave the Schengen zone before you can come back in and start your bilateral agreement in that country. I know it's a lot to take in. So I'll give you a little example. This trip coming up will be in Europe for over 90 days, and the entire time we're planning to be in the Schengen countries. Our plan is to use up our full 90 days by driving from Finland to Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Czech Republic, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, then it's Croatia, Slovenia, and then back to the Czech Republic. So our full 90 days will be completely used up by the time we finish this trip, and to be able to extend our trip, we're going to be flying into the UK to get our passports stamped, and then we're coming back into places like Iceland, Germany, or Austria. We're not really sure what we're going to do yet, but that is how we can get around the whole 90-day Schengen visa thing and take advantage of the bilateral agreement. Or at least that's how it should work. Honestly, I'm a little bit nervous because I've been told that not all border control staff know about the bilateral agreements, but if you plan on doing this, just make sure you email the embassy that you're going to and just ask them if they have a bilateral agreement, and then that way you've got it in paper and you can show the printout to border control if you get stuck. But I'm really interested to see how we go. It is a bit confusing at first, but once you understand how the Schengen rule works, it actually works a lot in your favour because it's so much easier to cross over borders without having to pull out your passport or wait in lines all the time. Now let's move on to flights and transport, because how you get to and move around Europe can really make or break your trip, especially when travelling with kids. When booking your flights, look into family-friendly airlines. Things like checked luggage, early boarding, meals for kids, and even a bassinet seat on the plane can make a big difference. If you're flying budget airlines in Europe like Ryanair or Wizz Air, just be aware that a lot of things are extra. So this is things like checked luggage, your seat selection, even sometimes printing your boarding pass. So factor in those costs before you make your bookings. The cheapest flight that Tom and I have ever taken was €15 and it was with Ryanair. The big negative of it was that it left at 3 AM and we only had carry-on bags. So make sure you weigh up the pros and cons of cheap flights with kids before booking. If you've got a long-haul flight with a stopover, try and plan this strategically. A short stop might sound good in theory, but it can be stressful if you've got kids or strollers running from terminal to terminal. On the other hand, a longer stretch like 4 to 6 hours can give your kids time to eat, stretch, maybe get some of that energy out, or even have a nap in the airport lounge or a quiet area. Some airports even have playgrounds, and that can be a lifesaver for those long travel days. Once you're in Europe, you've got a few options for actually getting around, and that's things like trains, buses, planes, and driving. Trains are often the most relaxing and scenic option, especially in countries like Germany, France, or Switzerland. This is a good option because you can walk around, there's space for strollers, and they're super efficient for getting you from one centre of a place to another centre of a place. Flights between countries can be cheap, but the airport process can be really tiring. Driving gives you the most flexibility, especially if you're visiting smaller villages, nature areas, or multiple countries. But keep in mind that you may need to bring your own car seat, especially if your child is under 4. Not all hire car companies offer these, and the availability and the quality of them can vary a lot, and that's even if you pre-book. We've hired car seats in Europe before, and we did get lucky by having them as pretty good quality, but they honestly can sometimes be more expensive to hire than to actually buy. so make sure you check the hire costs before you do your booking. I also want to mention quickly that if you do plan on hiring a car, make sure you check their rules for crossing into different borders. Some car hire companies won't allow you to cross into non-Schengen zones, and I got stuck with this recently. I read the fine print and we actually weren't allowed to drive into the places that we had already booked. So when planning transport, make sure to think of what's the least stressful and the most flexible for you and your family, and not just the fastest or cheapest option. Now let's talk about accommodation, because where you stay can have a huge impact on how your day runs with your kids. For most families, including ours, Airbnbs or holiday homes are a really great option. Having a kitchen to prepare meals or heat up food or do your laundry can be really helpful. It also gives you some extra space, which can be really good if your kid is still napping or if they go to bed earlier than you do. Staying in Airbnbs is essential for us because our children have intolerances and allergies, which means I'm always needing to cook and prepare meals for our kids. I also just prefer Airbnbs because they kind of make me feel more homey rather than just be hotel hopping and stuck in a small space. If you're booking a hotel, make sure to check for family-friendly features. Things like lift access, especially if you're traveling with a pram, and whether they provide kid-sized beds or cots. Booking.com is a great place to find and compare hotels, and a lot of the time, if I don't like what I'm seeing on Airbnb, I'll go over to Booking.com and I'll cross-check it. And this sometimes brings up new options for me, especially if I click the filter where I want a kitchen, and occasionally the same apartments on Airbnb will pop up here as well, but they'll be cheaper. Now let's talk about some cultural things you'll want to be prepared for before traveling to Europe with kids. One really big one for me is the restaurant hours. In many European countries, restaurants might not open until 7 or 8 p.m. at night, which can feel really late if your kids are used to eating earlier, like ours are. So be prepared to eat at home, change your schedule, or even bring some snacks for the kids to eat while you're waiting. You'll usually be able to find somewhere to eat, but it might not be the most authentic restaurant in town. In some countries, public bathrooms might not have baby changing facilities, so it helps to bring a small changing mat and be ready to get creative with where you're going to be changing your baby. And not all cafes and restaurants will offer you high chairs, especially outside of big cities. You'll also notice cultural differences in how your kids are treated. In places like Italy, kids are often welcomed with open arms. Our girls got a lot of smiles, some little gifts, and a really warm atmosphere. In other countries, people might be a little bit more hands-off or formal, and that's not something you should take personally. It's just a different way of interacting. When you're moving around Europe with kids, less really is more. The amount of stairs you'll be dragging your luggage up is insane. First up, a lightweight stroller is a must-have. Look for one that's easy to fold and carry on trains, buses, planes, and even good on cobblestone streets. I also recommend having a baby carrier handy for times when the pram won't work. Honestly though, our Baby Zen Yo-Yo travel pram has been so good, and I highly recommend you look into that if you don't already have a travel stroller, because it's handled all of the bumpy tracks, the cobblestone streets, and all the stairs. We've dragged it up and down really well. It's coming again on our next trip, and I definitely wouldn't be without it. If your kids have sensitive skin or you prefer certain brands, you might want to consider bringing your own nappies and wipes. But of course, this will vary depending on how long you're going for. If you're going for a huge chunk of time, you're not going to be able to bring a whole stash of nappies. So maybe if your child is really sensitive, you might want to look into using cloth nappies. But if your child isn't sensitive and you're not fussy about the brand, you'll often find plenty of nappies and wipes in the big cities. And just make sure you stock up before you're going into any really rural areas. Medications are a must, and make sure you bring any prescriptions that you or your children might need. Also pack a really good first aid kit, which includes things like band-aids, a thermometer, maybe some Panadol, and anything else that's specific to your child's health needs. Staying connected is important too. A pocket Wi-Fi or eSIM can be a game changer for navigating new cities, looking up things on maps, or even translating menus. Many countries have affordable data plans for tourists, and having a good connection on your phone while traveling can really help you to feel more confident. Lastly, don't forget the right power adapters or chargers for your devices. You might want to look into getting a universal power adapter. This will just help you to know that you have a plug that you need no matter where you go. A small power strip can also be handy if you have multiple devices to charge all at once. Now trust me when I say this, travel insurance is absolutely non-negotiable when traveling with or without kids. It's something you do not want to skip or cut corners on, because medical care can get really expensive if something unexpected happens. We learned the value of good travel insurance on our first overseas trip with our kids when our oldest daughter broke her leg in Japan. We flew into Tokyo, we had a full day of exploring, everyone was great, excited for a big 3-week trip, and on the second full day of us being there, we decided to go to Disneyland for the day. But as we were lining up to get inside the gates, Tom was holding Mila, and as he went to step forward, his shoelaces got stuck together and he just fell to the ground. She was inconsolable, screaming, and we just knew instantly that something was really wrong. I was actually so relieved that it did happen at Disneyland, as weird as that sounds, because they actually had first aid staff really close by and they were able to get us to the nearest hospital quite quickly. There was zero English spoken and it was so hard to use Google Translate for such a serious problem. So they did an x-ray on her leg. He really only said that it seemed to be broken and not to touch it and that we had to fly home immediately. I was pretty much like, what do you mean? Surely there's a doctor here that can fix her so we don't have to put her on a plane and take her home while she has a broken leg. But this had happened on New Year's Eve. And if you're to know anything about Japan, it's that New Year's is their biggest holiday of the year. So basically no orthopedic surgeons were available for 4 days. So our options were very small, and that was to either stay in Tokyo for 4 days with her broken leg or fly home as soon as possible and get her leg fixed in Australia. Of course, mum mode kicked in then and I had zero care for the expenses that we'd already pre-booked, and I booked the next flight out that night. We only had to pay $1,200 out of pocket for that hospital visit, which included the x-rays, which I honestly thought was pretty good. I was expecting a huge bill, and thankfully by the time we got home, I had Mila's leg put in a cast. We put a claim through our travel insurance and we managed to get 80% of our whole trip back, which meant once Mila's leg healed, we could actually rebook the trip and try again. And that's exactly what we did. But that was not a good first overseas trip with our kids. So make sure your travel insurance covers medical, cancellation, lost luggage, delays, all of the things. Just really check the fine print, and also make sure it covers the countries that you're visiting, because if you go somewhere and something happens and you didn't tell them that's where you're going, they might not cover you for that. One of my best pieces of advice is to be flexible with meal times and expectations. Kids might get hungry at really strange hours, or like I said before, restaurants might not open until really late. So make sure you have snacks on hand at all times. Grocery stores and markets are also going to be your new best friends. Picking up simple ingredients for picnics or mealtime can save you money, stress, and honestly, it's just really convenient. If your child has allergies or intolerances like ours do, make sure you get a little card that is translated in the language that you're going to explain what your child cannot eat. We also like to travel with a cooler bag and ice bricks. That way I can prepare the food before we leave, and I feel much more confident knowing that I've got the food that my child can eat on me at all times. Europe is absolutely packed with parks, museums, and fun things to do like scenic train rides that the kids will absolutely love. These activities can give your little one a chance to burn off some energy, which helps your day go a lot smoother. One super helpful tip is to use Google Maps to plan ahead. You can add all of your own custom pins, which include things like family-friendly cafes, parks, playgrounds, and places you want to visit, and you can do this before you even leave home. That way you can download your map for that area and you'll always have these pins no matter where you go, even if you're offline. And before we finish, let's talk about some things to help you make your trip to Europe with your kids as smooth and easy as possible. First, allow for some slow mornings and don't cram too much into one day. Kids and adults need some time to rest and recharge, so make sure you plan for some downtime. Don't overplan your itinerary, and just know that it's okay to take things at a slower pace. Learning a few key phrases in the local language can go a really long way. Simple words like please, thank you, or where's the bathroom are not only practical to know, but it also shows respect, and you'll often get a smile from the locals. Prepare your kids ahead of time for the realities of travel. Long flights, jet lag, sleeping in new beds, and new environments. Talking about what to expect can help reduce anxiety and make things go a little smoother. And lastly, remember to have fun. Travel with kids is never going to be perfect, and that's okay. It's the unexpected moments and little challenges that create the best memories. Embrace the adventure, take lots of photos, and enjoy this time together as a family. If you've ever traveled to Europe with kids, or you're planning a trip soon, drop any questions or your stories below, because I'd love to hear from you. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see how we handle our big trip coming up next week, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you next week.